So I watched a few Forspoken review videos, and it's not a surprise the game apparently sucks. I did a video about my lack of enthusiasm for the game and AAA games in general lately. This was a couple of months ago I did that video. To me, the problems I had with it was that, Frey, the main character, she looks drab. And it's like they went out of their way to make her look unsexy. Now, when I say sexy, she doesn't mean that she has to have like her boobs and butt hanging out, but something to make her look, appealing. The actress who they modeled the character off is actually an attractive woman, but I know Square Enix has this thing where they are deglamorizing and uglifying their female characters and making them less sexy and to defeat the male gaze. So it's back to that again. So that was one of the things that was annoying about it, because it was like, so what? She has these different cloaks and costumes, and she could wear nails to upgrade her powers. If she just looks drab and uninteresting and looks like she's basically walking around with different variations of a potato sack, who cares? So that was that. Like I said, the character looks drab. I'm tired of AAA gaming constantly trying to defeat the male gaze. So that was one issue. And the other issue was that stupid ad, that Twitter ad, where she's like, freaking dragons, and yeah, that's what I could do now, and all that stupid, silly, how do you do, fellow kids type dialogue. But yeah, so I'm watching reviews of Forspoken, right? And these days, I only really trust YouTubers' opinions on this sort of thing, for the most part. But I watched this Eurogamer review, and it was good up until this point.
As a middle-class white woman, I am not the right person to talk about this in depth, so I'm going to keep this short. All I'm going to say is that to me, having a black girl in trouble with the law who lives in an abandoned building being arrested as soon as she enters a fantasy world and called a monster by a white crowd felt incredibly problematic.
Move, monster!
Hey, the fuck you calling monster?
The monster speaks!
Yeah, of course I speak, and put your pointy stick away, asshole!
Move!
Alright!
I urge you to read articles and watch videos from black writers and creators about Forspoken, because they are the people we have to be listening to.
Now, this is where I have to put on my tinfoil hat, because there's this phenomenon when it comes to supposedly left-wing, content creators, gaming journalists, people online who do this racist thing where they pretend to be offended by stuff that's not really that big of a deal. Like the whole thing about orcs, how they keep pretending that orcs are an analog to black people. So they get offended by orcs and then go, oh, this is racist. D&D is racist. It has to be changed. Dungeons and Dragons needs to be changed and be more inclusive because the racist orcs. And it's like, why are you so quick to claim that orcs are actually just the Dungeons and Dragons world version of black people? Like, why is that y'all so comfortable saying that? And they do it too with the goblins and Hogwarts Legacy. All of a sudden the goblins are Jews, and they love doing that and then saying, oh, you're anti-Semite if you want to make a game about goblins trying to uprise and then you stop them because you're basically keeping the Jews down. There's something really pernicious about that. And for this woman who did this review on Eurogamer of Forspoken to end it with this BS about it's incredibly problematic that these guards in the fantasy world called the black woman a monster and immediately imprisoned her. And it's like nobody who's playing a fantasy game about a character who's comes into their world, she looks different than anybody else. And I don't even mean race-wise, just she's dressed differently. She just pops up out of nowhere. I don't know how it looks story-wise, like how she suddenly appears, but they're like, oh, this is a monster, but nobody, like, black people in real life are not being called monsters as if this is the like slur that we have to like a history with. And just because she's imprisoned, of course, that's almost the first thing that happens to an adventurer, a stranger in a strange land, is they get captured, they get imprisoned, they are treated like a threat. And then, so what? They didn't call her, the hard R N word or anything. They straight up called her a monster. But oh no, it's problematic that you do it. And this is something that I've talked about other videos. This, besides this sort of virtue signaling, racist, white guilt thing, where we're pretending to be offended by stuff that you're associating black people with that isn't like a thing. Black people being called monsters isn't really a thing. Certainly not in this situation, because again, it's a fantasy world. So the other issue is these are the same people who push for inclusion and diversity. But when you do it, they have all these problems with it. It can't just be done so if it's a white character, they can call that white character monster. They can imprison that character, and these journalists and these people who are virtue signaling won't attack it for being problematic. But if you put a black person in that situation, then suddenly the same things that happen to white people in these stories are now problematic when it's for black people. So it's like, what the hell? Like, what are you trying to say? Again, I've said this before. The best argument against inclusion and diversity are the people who push for it, because it limits what you can do. You can't just do a story about a young black woman in a strange land, because if you do, any threat that she faces, any challenge, any insult hurled at her becomes more than just, oh, this is what would happen to a character in this fantasy land. All of a sudden, it's all this, it's problematic, and we must listen to the black YouTubers and black creators to get their voices and to understand. We must stop, and we must listen, and we must genuflect before. It's just bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. And I feel like they do that to undermine sort of race relations and undermine, black characters in these stories. Because if nobody's talking about it, and you just do an entire review of, hey, the game sucks, the character is not likable. Other people say, yeah, it sucks, I'm not going to play it. And nobody's talking about the race. All of a sudden, you lose, or these people lose, that element where they can do the clickbaiting and the race baiting, whatever the heck they think is going to get them views anymore. I don't understand it. And it's funny, I know Sophia Norwitz, I guess, posted a tweet about a Polygon review of the game where the guy complained about it, and Yellow Flash did a video on it. Let me find that. Okay, so I screenshotted this part of the article. Let's see. So I think the way it was characterized by Sophia Norwitz and Yellow Flash was that the writer of this Polygon review was basically saying that, no one was calling her the N-word, so Frey. No one was calling Frey the N-word, so that there was a problem with her blackness or something, like that. They didn't treat her like a black character, but that's not quite it. It's actually in a way kind of worse. But anyway, so here it is. Before I wrap up, let's spare a word for Frey, a notionally black protagonist who joins a growing trend in media of putting black people in worlds where race is inconsequential. That's actually very annoying in a lot of situations, because that's not really true. They don't put them where race is inconsequential. They force them in like Tudor England and fucking Iceland in the 800s. But anyway, except the game is very insistent that Frey is a New Yorker, mysterious birth or no, spending her entire life up until this point growing up in our decidedly non-fantasy world, where blackness is not a non-factor. It's like, shut the fuck up. Regrettably, Frey's identity is thinly written and awkwardly deployed, as the story leans not only on stereotypical narratives, but trauma as a plot device. If it was a white character, it'd be the same thing. And it is funny because they talk about the guy, and they show a picture of the guy who actually wrote this article, and I think he's from Iowa. And it's like, shut the fuck up, dude. Don't tell us how we're supposed to experience blackness in entertainment. Some fucking white dude. But anyway, an early plot point, and this is the part. So they showed this first part. Yellow Flash and Sophia Norwitz, I posted that first part. I don't know. I didn't find that tweet. But anyway, this is the part that really annoyed me about this whole section. So this asshole goes on to go. An early plot point involves Frey holding the lifeless body of an Athenian black girl, with whom she has bonded, an image that, in the raceless world of Athia, doesn't carry the same weight it does in ours. And Frey's. This is a fictional story. Initially, Frey is spurred to action, vowing revenge for the child's death, which led me to believe, optimistically, that the game was thinking about Frey's identity as more than just the sum of his repeated insistence of her love of kicks, and the one time she says, okay, bet. Unfortunately, like everything in Forspoken, the death is quickly relegated to quip fodder, as Frey jokingly calls the child's murderer the kitty killer herself, which brings us back to square one. A two-dimensional foster kid with a rap sheet who swears so often you think she was paid by the motherfucker. There's nothing about race in this complaint. The complaint is a thinly veiled two-dimensional character, making her more black. And like, basically, this fucking idiot is saying that he was happy that her being spurred to action by the death of a black child was going to somehow make her more meaningful. Because again, it's about her race. It's not about her as a person. You know, then when he's complaining about, oh, the quips, that isn't tied to race. That's just tied to this whole stupid, MCU phenomenon that we have to suffer through. Race really had nothing to do with it. I mean, he's making the complaint about race, but his actual issue isn't really about race. A two-dimensional character has nothing to do with, whether she's black or not, or whether she comes from New York where race is a non-factor. She's in a fantasy world. So if it's a white girl, black girl, whoever she finds, if she wants to get justice and she wants to stop the killer, that's what she's going to want to do. It's not, well, as a black woman, I must avenge the death of this black child because her death means more to me than if it was a man or a white little girl. Oh, it's just stupid. And it's funny, somebody made a good point about these people who push for inclusion and diversity.
It's why I'm worried about House of the Dragon, is because if you read some of the writers and their opinions, we'll see what season 2 is. We'll see what Damon's character becomes, because there was one writer in particular, she is very unhappy that people like Damon. And so she had the scenes taken out where Damon was consoling the daughters because she didn't want them to like him. And I was like, we all know he's still like a monster and does these things.
Right.
But it's compelling that he has likable qualities. We don't have to hate him for him to be interesting. I don't know. So like writers like that are a problem because they don't see that the audience gets to decide, not the writer. A great character is the audience. Like Darth Vader did nothing likable for like everything but 2 minutes, and people loved him.
Also, you're making it a situation, once again, where you're taking a character and making them one-dimensional, and that's not real. For everything that they do to create stuff for modern audiences, they take away the one thing that makes modern people, and that's complexity. And so I've never understood why you would want to do that. It doesn't make sense. We've seen that with Velma. We've seen that with Geralt of Rivia. We've seen that with some of the Star Wars characters that they've put out. We've seen that with She-Hulk. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Right.
And
it's like a modern writing phenomenon. Right. I don't know what created it. But
so the people who push for inclusion and diversity are the people who are the biggest argument against it. They want one-dimensional characters, and they do this weird thing where they try to make real-life trauma the issue when people are legitimately trying to get away from that when they go into fantasy worlds and that kind of thing. Like, if you don't understand the point of fantasy, then you shouldn't have an opinion on it, and you shouldn't push so much to change it. And just to further hit home just how full of shit these people are, the Eurogamer reviewer, where she's complaining about, surrounded by white people who are calling her a monster and calling for her death or whatever, she never shows the fact that the people who are like the judges, the people who Frey is being brought in front of, includes a black woman and an Asian dude. She doesn't show that at all. So she's doing this thing where this is a problematic scene, and it's about racism, and we need to hear the black voices and let them speak their truths. When really, this black woman, was brought before another black woman and a Japanese dude. Yeah, they're full of shit.